In the scorching heat of southern Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers converge into marshlands that shimmer like molten bronze, lie the remains of humanity's first cities. Here, beneath layers of sand and clay accumulated over 5,000 years, archaeologists have uncovered something extraordinary: the physical evidence of the world's first organized religion. Clay tablets covered in wedge-shaped cuneiform writing, humanity's earliest script, tell stories of gods so powerful, so ancient, that they claim to have existed before time itself began. These weren't the distant, abstract deities of later monotheistic traditions. These were gods who walked among humans, who built cities with their own hands, who married, fought, and made decisions that shaped the course of human events. They were called the Anunnaki, a name that translates roughly as those of princely blood, or those who from heaven to earth came. To the Sumerians, who first wrote their names in clay around 3200 BCE, they were as real as the rivers that gave life to their crops, as tangible as the ziggurat temples that dominated their city skylines. But here's what makes this story remarkable. The Anunnaki weren't just characters in ancient mythology. They were the organizing principle of the world's first complex civilization. Every law, every building project, every military campaign, every harvest, all were conducted in their service and under their divine authority. Understanding the Anunnaki means understanding how humanity made the leap from scattered agricultural villages to organized city-states with governments, armies, and social hierarchies. How did a collection of gods become the foundation for human civilization itself? What can these ancient deities tell us about the people who worship them? And why did the world's first urban society feel the need to create such an elaborate divine hierarchy? Before we dive into this incredible story, I want you to know something. Every fact you're about to hear is based on actual archaeological evidence. We're not talking about ancient alien theories or modern conspiracy fantasies. We're exploring real history, the actual beliefs of real people who lived over 5,000 years ago, and whose innovations in writing, law, mathematics, and urban planning still influence our world today. If you're fascinated by ancient civilizations, by the origins of religion, or by the question of how humanity organized itself into complex societies, then this is the video for you. We'll be examining actual cuneiform tablets, archaeological sites, and the painstaking work of scholars who've dedicated their lives to translating and understanding these ancient texts. Hit that like button if you're ready to explore the world's oldest written religious tradition. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss future deep dives into ancient history. And in the comments, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how global our community of history enthusiasts really is. What you're about to discover will change how you think about the origins of civilization itself. Let's begin. The story of the Anunnaki begins in a place called Sumer, located in what is now southern Iraq. Around 4500 BCE, something unprecedented happened in human history. Small farming communities that had existed for thousands of years began coalescing into larger settlements. By 3500 BCE, these settlements had grown into genuine cities: Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, Nippur, urban centers with populations in the tens of thousands. This wasn't just a matter of more people living together. This was the birth of civilization as we understand it. Specialized labor, social hierarchies, organized religion, monumental architecture, written language, and centralized government. The Sumerians didn't just stumble into this new way of living, they engineered it, and at the heart of their engineering was religion. The geography of Mesopotamia, literally between rivers, shaped everything about Sumerian religion. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were both blessing and curse. They provided water for irrigation, making agriculture possible in an otherwise arid landscape. But they were unpredictable, prone to devastating floods that could destroy crops and settlements without warning. Unlike the Nile in Egypt, which flooded reliably and predictably, the Mesopotamian rivers were capricious, violent, and seemingly governed by forces beyond human understanding. This environmental reality shaped how the Sumerians conceived of their gods. The Anunnaki weren't distant or benevolent. They were powerful, sometimes wrathful, always demanding, and absolutely essential to appease. The relationship between humans and gods was transactional. Humans provided service, labor, and offerings. Gods provided protection, prosperity, and cosmic order. The earliest written references to the Anunnaki appear around 3200 BCE in some of humanity's very first written documents. These aren't narrative texts, those came later, but administrative records from temple complexes. Already we see an organized religious hierarchy. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were economic centers, administrative headquarters, and the literal houses of the gods who were believed to dwell within their inner sanctuaries. By 2600 BCE, during what scholars call the early dynastic period, the Anunnaki had become fully codified into a complex pantheon. The gods had family relationships, assigned roles, areas of authority, and elaborate mythologies explaining how the world came to be and how it functioned. These weren't simple nature spirits or ancestor ghosts. This was a sophisticated theological system that attempted to explain everything from the changing seasons to the rise and fall of political power. The Sumerian king list, compiled around 2100 BCE, but drawing on earlier traditions, claimed that kingship itself descended from heaven. Human rulers weren't just blessed by the gods, they were explicitly appointed by them and served at their pleasure. This theological framework justified political authority and provided stability to early urban societies that were still figuring out how to govern large populations. When we examine the actual tablets and inscriptions from this period, we find something remarkable: consistency. Despite being written across different cities and over many centuries, the basic structure of the Anunnaki pantheon remains stable. This suggests an organized priesthood maintaining and transmitting these traditions with remarkable fidelity. The Sumerians had created not just a religion, but a religious institution. Here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. The Sumerians faced a challenge that no previous human society had confronted. How do you organize and govern a complex urban society with tens of thousands of people, specialized occupations, accumulated wealth, and competing interests? Modern societies solve this through secular laws, police forces, and government bureaucracies. But the Sumerians were inventing civilization from scratch. They had no model to follow, no previous example to copy. Their solution was brilliant. They created a divine hierarchy that mirrored and justified the human social hierarchy they were building. At the top of the Anunnaki pantheon sat An, later called Anu, the sky god and ultimate authority. An was the king of the gods, but by the time we have extensive written records, he had largely become a distant figure, reigning but not ruling. The active governance of the cosmos had been delegated to his sons and appointed officials. Below An were the seven gods who decree the fates, the divine council that made the major decisions affecting both heaven and earth. This council included Enlil, the god of wind and storms, who became the chief executive deity; Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, who created humanity; Ninhursag, the mother goddess, and others depending on the city and time period. But here's what makes this system so sophisticated. The Anunnaki weren't just these seven major gods. Ancient texts speak of groups of 50 Anunnaki, 300 Anunnaki, and in some cases 600 Anunnaki. These weren't all individually named or characterized. They represented tiers of divine bureaucracy, cosmic administrators, each with specific functions. Think about what this means. The Sumerians conceptualized heaven as an organized bureaucracy with departments, chains of command, and specialized roles. It was a divine mirror of the complex administrative systems they were developing on Earth. Temple workers, scribes, priests, and administrators all had celestial counterparts. The gods needed food offerings. Humans needed food. The gods lived in temples. Humans built houses. The gods had hierarchies and ranks. So did human society. This wasn't primitive thinking. This was sophisticated organizational theory dressed in theological language. The scale of this theological system was staggering. Consider the temple complex at Nippur, the religious center of Sumer. Archaeological excavations have revealed a ziggurat platform measuring 73 meters by 62 meters at its base, roughly the size of a modern American football field. The temple itself sat atop this artificial mountain, making the dwelling place of Enlil literally tower over the city. But the physical structure was just the beginning. The temple employed hundreds of workers, priests who performed daily rituals, singers who performed sacred music, scribes who recorded offerings and maintained accounts, administrators who managed the temple's vast land holdings and herds, guards who protected the sacred precincts, and laborers who maintained the buildings and brought water and food offerings. All of this, the architecture, the hierarchy, the daily operations, existed to serve the Anunnaki, to maintain the cosmic order they had established. The challenge wasn't just creating a religion, it was creating a sustainable system that could organize human labor, redistribute resources, maintain social order, and provide meaning and purpose to people's lives. And they had to do this while facing the harsh realities of Mesopotamian life: unpredictable flooding, periodic drought, conflict with neighboring cities, and the constant threat of social breakdown. The Anunnaki had to be powerful enough to handle these cosmic scale problems, yet involved enough to care about individual human concerns. To understand what the Anunnaki meant to ordinary Sumerians, we need to step into their world. Imagine you're a farmer in the city of Uruk around 2600 BCE. Your day begins before dawn with a simple prayer to your personal god. Yes, beyond the great Anunnaki, every person had a personal deity who interceded on their behalf with the higher gods, like a divine advocate or lawyer. You walk through streets already bustling with activity toward your fields outside the city walls. Above you, dominating the skyline, rises the temple complex of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, Uruk's patron deity. You can see smoke rising from the temple. The morning offerings are being made. The priests are feeding the goddess, providing her with bread, beer, meat, and incense. This isn't symbolic. The Sumerians believed the gods literally consumed these offerings, drawing nourishment from them just as humans did from their meals. As you work your field, you're acutely aware that you don't own this land. Not really. It belongs to the temple, to Inanna herself. You work it as a tenant, paying a portion of your harvest as rent and taxes. But this isn't experienced as oppression. This is the natural order of things. The goddess owns the land. You have the privilege of working it. In return, she protects you, your family, and your city. Let me introduce you to someone real. His name was Ur-Nammu, and he ruled the city of Ur around 2112-2095 BCE. We know about him not just from king lists, but from his own words preserved in clay. He describes himself as the man chosen by the god Nanna, the moon god who was Ur's patron deity. Ur-Nammu didn't claim to rule by his own strength or wisdom. He ruled because Nanna had selected him, and he governed as the god's earthly representative. Ur-Nammu's law code, the oldest law code we've ever discovered, begins not with human authority, but with divine mandate. The text states that the great gods An and Enlil gave kingship to Nanna, and Nanna gave authority to Ur-Nammu. Every law he enacted, every judgment he rendered, derived its legitimacy from this divine chain of command. But what did ordinary people actually feel about the Anunnaki? We have evidence in the form of personal prayers inscribed on small tablets. One text, written by a scribe named Rim-Sin-Gamel, pleads with the goddess Inanna, "My lady, I have observed your festivals. I have brought you my tribute. I have stood in prayer before you. Why have you turned your face from me?" This reveals something profound. The relationship between humans and gods was personal, emotional, and fraught with the same uncertainties as any relationship. The gods could be pleased or angered, attentive or distracted. Humans worried about offending them, tried to gain their favor, and struggled to understand why bad things happened even when they'd done everything right. Consider the experience of a priestess serving in the temple of Nanna at Ur. Her name was Enheduanna, and she lived around 2285 BCE. She's the first author in human history whose name we know, the very first person to sign their written work. She was also the daughter of King Sargon of Akkad, appointed as high priestess as part of her father's strategy to unite his newly conquered empire through religious authority. Enheduanna wrote hymns to Inanna that survive to this day. In them, she describes the goddess in vivid, terrifying detail. Inanna, fierce lion, you fill the earth with your roaring, you pounce on the enemy, you devour the prey. These aren't the words of someone going through the motions. This is someone who believes utterly in the reality and power of the deity she serves. But Enheduanna also reveals the human cost of this service. When she was temporarily exiled from her position due to political upheaval, she wrote a lament describing her despair, her sense of abandonment by the goddess she'd served faithfully. Even for the elite, religious devotion came with genuine emotional stakes. For a construction worker building one of Ur's massive ziggurats, the Anunnaki were present in every brick. Each brick was stamped with the name of the king and the god for whom the building was erected. You weren't just building a structure, you were literally constructing the house of a god. This work was sacred, meaningful, part of maintaining the cosmic order. The human experience of the Anunnaki wasn't abstract theology. It was daily practice, personal relationship, and the organizing principle of society. These gods were everywhere. In the courts where judges invoked them while rendering verdicts, in the marriage contracts where couples swore oaths by them, in the merchants' ledgers where weights and measures were guaranteed by divine authority, in the soldiers' prayers before battle, in the mothers' pleas for their children's health. So how did this elaborate system actually work? How did the Sumerians create and maintain a religious structure complex enough to organize an entire civilization? The answer lies in the creation myth itself, the Enuma Elish and related texts that explain the origins of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. According to Sumerian and later Babylonian mythology, in the beginning there was only the primordial waters, Apsu, the fresh water, and Tiamat, the salt water. From their union came the first gods, and from them, eventually, the Anunnaki. But here's where it gets interesting. The early gods grew noisy and disruptive, disturbing the sleep of the primordial parents. Apsu decided to destroy them. The god Enki, through wisdom and cunning, defeated Apsu and took control of the fresh waters beneath the earth, the source of wells and springs that made agriculture possible. Later, Tiamat waged war against the gods to avenge Apsu's death. The young god Marduk, in the Babylonian version, or Enlil, in earlier Sumerian versions, defeated Tiamat, splitting her body in half to create heaven and earth. This is cosmic order emerging from primordial chaos through divine violence, a story that resonated in a region where floods, wars, and natural disasters were constant threats. Now comes the crucial moment. The gods, victorious but exhausted from their battles and cosmic labors, needed rest. But who would do the work of maintaining the world? Who would dig irrigation canals, plant crops, tend animals, and maintain the temples? The god Enki had a solution: create humanity. According to the Atrahasis epic, Enki mixed clay with the blood of a slain god, specifically a god who had been involved in the rebellion against the established order. Humanity was created from this mixture, imbued with divine essence but formed from earth, to serve the gods in their place. This wasn't a degrading origin story to the Sumerians. This was humanity's purpose. We exist to serve the gods, to perform the labor that maintains cosmic order. In return, the gods provide protection, prosperity, and the structure that makes civilized life possible. But the system required constant maintenance. The Anunnaki needed daily offerings: food, drink, clothing, and incense. Temple rituals weren't occasional affairs. They were daily operations performed with military precision. At dawn, priests would awaken the god's statue, wash and dress it, and present the first meal of the day. Throughout the day, additional offerings would be made. At night, the god would be prepared for sleep. These weren't empty gestures. The Sumerians believed that if the offerings stopped, if the rituals weren't performed correctly, the gods would become angry or simply withdraw their protection. Cosmic order itself was at stake. This belief provided a powerful motivation for the entire society to support the temple system. The genius of this system was its self-reinforcing nature. Large-scale agriculture required irrigation. Irrigation required coordinated labor involving thousands of people. Coordination required organization and authority. Authority required legitimacy. The Anunnaki provided that legitimacy through divine mandate. When the city of Lagash went to war with neighboring Umma over water rights around 2500 BCE, it wasn't just a political conflict, it was a religious one. The border between the two cities had been established by the gods Enlil and Ninurta themselves, or so Lagash claimed. Their king, Eannatum, described how the god Ningirsu appeared to him in a dream, promising victory. When Lagash won the battle, the victory wasn't attributed to superior tactics or numbers, but to divine intervention. This is how the system worked. Every human institution was mirrored by a divine counterpart. Kings ruled because gods appointed them. Priests interpreted divine will. Scribes recorded the words of gods as well as humans. Even merchants conducted business under the watchful eyes of gods, who punished fraud and guaranteed honest weights and measures. The sophistication of this system becomes clear when we examine legal texts. The famous Law Code of Hammurabi, dating to around 1750 BCE, depicts the king receiving the laws directly from the sun god Shamash. The laws themselves aren't presented as human innovations, but as divine revelations. When you violated a law, you weren't just breaking a social contract, you were offending the gods themselves. This created a moral framework that extended beyond simple rule following. The Sumerians developed concepts of sin, guilt, and divine punishment that would influence all subsequent Middle Eastern religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Personal prayers frequently include confessions of sins, sometimes specific, sometimes general admissions of unwitting offenses. One prayer text pleads, "The sin which I have committed I know not, the misdeed which I have done I know not." This reveals a sophisticated understanding of human fallibility. You might offend the gods without even realizing it, through ignorance or accident. The solution was constant vigilance, regular offerings, and maintaining right relationships with both gods and humans. The religious system built around the Anunnaki didn't remain confined to Sumer. As Sumerian civilization was absorbed by the Akkadian Empire, then the Babylonians, and eventually the Assyrians, the Anunnaki pantheon evolved but never disappeared. Akkadian became the lingua franca of the ancient Near East, and with it spread Mesopotamian religious concepts. When we examine the Old Testament of the Bible, we can see clear influences from Mesopotamian mythology. The Garden of Eden story echoes Sumerian tales of the Paradise Garden of Dilmun. The biblical flood narrative parallels the flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the gods send a deluge to destroy humanity. Even the name Eden likely derives from the Sumerian word Eden, meaning plain or steppe. But the influence went far beyond narrative borrowing. The very concept of a divine council, gods meeting to decide the fate of nations and individuals, appears in early biblical texts. Psalm 82 describes God standing in the divine assembly, judging among the gods. This reflects older Canaanite and Mesopotamian concepts of gods ruling collectively. The angel hierarchy in later Jewish and Christian tradition, archangels, angels, seraphim, cherubim, echoes the tiered structure of the Anunnaki with their ranks and specialized functions. The idea that divine beings could be assigned to specific nations or peoples appears in Deuteronomy 32, where God divides the nations according to the number of divine beings. This concept makes much more sense in a polytheistic context where multiple powerful deities existed simultaneously. Even in Islam, which emphasizes strict monotheism, we can see traces of ancient Mesopotamian thought. The concept of angels as divine messengers and administrators, the idea of a divine book recording all deeds, the belief in a cosmic judgment, all have precursors in Mesopotamian religion. But perhaps the most profound legacy of the Anunnaki cult is the idea that civilization itself requires divine sanction. For nearly 3,000 years, every major empire in Mesopotamia legitimized its authority through the gods. Kings weren't just military leaders or administrators, they were divinely appointed shepherds of humanity, responsible to the gods for the welfare of their people. This created a theological basis for social responsibility. The gods demanded justice, care for widows and orphans, honest business practices, and proper treatment of the poor. When Ur-Nammu boasted in his law code that he had established equity in the land, he was claiming to have fulfilled his divine mandate. when Hammurabi declared that the gods had commissioned him to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil. He was articulating a concept of divinely ordained social justice. Compare this to modern secular governance, which derives its legitimacy from popular sovereignty, constitutional law, and democratic process. For most of human history, no such concepts existed. Authority came from above, from the divine realm, and rulers who failed in their religious duties risked not just political upheaval, but cosmic catastrophe. The archaeological evidence shows how seriously this was taken. Temple complexes in major cities consumed enormous resources. Estimates suggest that in some periods, up to one-third of a city's economic output went to religious purposes. This wasn't wasted from the Sumerian perspective. This was the necessary cost of maintaining cosmic order, of keeping the gods satisfied and the universe functioning properly. Modern scholars debate whether the priests truly believed in the gods or cynically manipulated religious sentiment for political control. This is likely the wrong question. In a world where religion and daily life were inseparable, where every aspect of existence had a religious dimension, belief wasn't a category that made sense. The gods simply were, as obviously real as the sun and rain, as necessary as breath. The mathematical and astronomical achievements of Mesopotamian priests testify to their sophisticated thinking. These weren't credulous primitives, they were calculating the movements of planets, predicting eclipses, developing sophisticated mathematical systems, and creating the world's first written literature. Yet they did all of this within a religious framework, as a form of service to the gods who had ordered the cosmos. When Babylonian astronomers created detailed observations of Venus over many years, they were engaged in both science and religion simultaneously. The movements of celestial bodies were divine communications, messages from the gods about the future. Mathematics itself was considered sacred knowledge, taught in temple schools and used primarily for religious purposes before any secular applications. This integration of religion, government, science, and daily life represents a worldview fundamentally different from our own. We categorize these as separate spheres. We have separation of church and state. We distinguish science from religion. We separate public from private belief. The Sumerians would have found such divisions incomprehensible. Life was holistic, and the Anunnaki were woven into every thread. What can we learn from the Anunnaki and the civilization built around them? At first glance, ancient Mesopotamian religion seems completely foreign to modern sensibilities. We don't believe in pantheons of gods controlling natural phenomena. We don't think humanity was created to serve divine beings. We don't organize our societies around temple worship. Yet beneath the mythological surface lies something profound about the human condition and our need for meaning, structure, and purpose. The Sumerians faced a fundamental challenge that every complex society faces. How do you coordinate large groups of strangers to work toward common goals? How do you create and maintain social hierarchies? How do you justify why some people have authority over others? How do you motivate people to sacrifice for the collective good? Their solution was theological: create a divine order that mirrors and justifies human social order. This wasn't cynical manipulation, though certainly some rulers exploited religious sentiment. Rather, it was a genuine attempt to make sense of the world and humanity's place in it. Consider what the Anunnaki provided: explanation for natural phenomena. Storms, floods, droughts were the actions of specific gods. Moral framework: the gods rewarded virtue and punished vice. Social structure: everyone had a place in the divinely ordered hierarchy. Purpose: maintaining cosmic order through service. And hope: the gods, while demanding, could be pleased and would provide provision and prosperity. In our secular age, we've replaced these functions with science, philosophy, law, and economics. Science explains natural phenomena through impersonal forces and laws. Philosophy and secular ethics provide moral frameworks. Democracy and constitutional law structure society and legitimate authority. Economics and psychology explain human motivation and purpose. But have we truly moved beyond the fundamental needs that the Anunnaki addressed? Humans still crave meaning and purpose. We still need to organize ourselves into functional societies. We still seek moral frameworks to distinguish right from wrong. We still wonder about our place in the universe. The Anunnaki also represent something crucial about the human imagination and our capacity for abstract thought. The Sumerians created an entire invisible world, a cosmic bureaucracy, divine councils, heavenly palaces, and used it to organize their visible world. This required extraordinary cognitive sophistication, the ability to think symbolically, to create and maintain complex narratives, to coordinate belief across thousands of people. This same capacity for creating shared fictions, whether we call them religions, ideologies, or social constructs, is what enables human civilization. Money is a shared fiction. Nations are shared fictions. Laws are shared fictions. All require collective belief in abstract concepts with no physical reality. The Sumerians were pioneers in harnessing this uniquely human capacity. There's also something profound in how the Anunnaki were understood to be both transcendent and immanent, vastly powerful yet intimately involved in human affairs. The gods lived in cosmic realms far beyond human reach, yet they dwelt in temple statues and heard individual prayers. They created the universe, yet they needed daily offerings of bread and beer. This paradox, divine beings who are both omnipotent and dependent, reflects a sophisticated theological insight. Power and relationship are not mutually exclusive. Modern religions inherited this tension. God is both infinite and personal, all-powerful yet responsive to prayer, transcendent yet immanent. The Anunnaki pioneered this theological balancing act, creating gods who were powerful enough to be worth worshiping, yet involved enough to be worth praying to. Perhaps most significantly, the Anunnaki system embodied a fundamental truth about civilization. It requires trust and cooperation on a massive scale. The temple system worked only because thousands of people collectively agreed to support it. Farmers paid their temple taxes because they believed in the system. Workers labored on ziggurats because the work was meaningful. Priests performed daily rituals because they believed it mattered. When that collective belief fractured, when people stopped believing the gods were real, or that the temples deserved support, or that the old order was legitimate, civilizations collapsed. This happened repeatedly in Mesopotamian history. The fall of kingdoms was understood theologically. The gods had withdrawn their favor and transferred power to new rulers. We see the same pattern today, though in secular terms. Modern states depend on collective belief in their legitimacy. When that belief erodes, no amount of military power can preserve the system. The Anunnaki remind us that civilization is ultimately held together not by force but by shared stories, beliefs, and values. Today, the temples of the Anunnaki lie in ruins. The mighty ziggurat of where priests once climbed stairs toward heaven itself, is now a pile of mud bricks slowly eroding in the Iraqi desert. The clay tablets recording hymns, prayers, and rituals sit in museum cases, their cuneiform script deciphered, but their religious power long extinguished. No one worships Enlil or Enki anymore. The Divine Council no longer convenes to decide the fate of nations, yet in a deeper sense the Anunnaki live on. Every time we appeal to higher principles to justify our actions, we echo the Sumerian kings who ruled by divine mandate. Every time we organize ourselves into hierarchies and bureaucracies, we mirror the cosmic administration the Sumerians imagined. Every time we seek meaning and purpose beyond mere survival, we walk paths first trodden by priests serving gods whose names we've forgotten. The Anunnaki were not real in any literal sense. No archaeologist has found evidence of actual divine beings walking the streets of or meeting in council. But they were real in the most important sense. They shaped human behavior, organized societies, inspired monumental achievements, and provided meaning to millions of lives across thousands of years. The priests who daily fed the gods, the scribes who recorded divine words, the kings who ruled as earthly representatives of heaven, they weren't deluded fools. They were our ancestors, just as intelligent and sophisticated as we are, solving the problems of their age with the intellectual tools available to them. They created civilization itself, inventing writing, law, mathematics, and urban planning. They did this not despite their religion, but through it. When we study the Anunnaki, we're not examining primitive superstition or ancient alien fantasies. We're exploring humanity's first systematic attempt to understand and organize the world through religion. We're witnessing the birth of theological thinking, the creation of divine bureaucracies that would influence every subsequent religion in the Western world. The Sumerians gave us more than clay tablets and ruined temples. They gave us the idea that the universe operates according to principles, that authority must be justified, that justice is a cosmic concern, that humans have purpose beyond mere existence. Strip away the specific gods and myths, and what remains is the foundation of how we still think about morality, meaning, and social organization. 5,000 years from now, what will remain of our civilization? What gods and beliefs will archaeologists of the future excavate? Will they see us as we see the Sumerians, brilliant, creative, but imprisoned by beliefs we couldn't see beyond? Or will they recognize, as we can recognize in the Anunnaki cult, the eternal human need to make sense of existence and find our place in the cosmos? The Anunnaki remind us that civilization is always a work in progress, that every age creates the gods it needs, that meaning and order don't exist in nature, but must be imagined into existence through collective belief and sustained effort. If this deep dive into the world's oldest organized religion has expanded your understanding of human history and religion's role in civilization, hit that like button. Subscribe for more explorations of ancient civilizations and the ideas that shaped our world. And in the comments, share your thoughts. What aspects of ancient Mesopotamian religion surprised you most? How do you see their innovations reflected in modern belief systems? The Anunnaki no longer rule heaven or earth, but their legacy, the questions they asked, the solutions they created, the civilizations they inspired, lives on in every city we build, every law we write, every prayer we whisper hoping someone, somewhere is listening.